So you want to buy a storage facility? Most people think this is where real money goes to hide. The serious money builds apartment towers and glass office blocks. Storage is what you settle for when you can't afford to build something a person would actually live in. A metal shed on the edge of town, next to the tire shop. Look at the filings and that picture flips. Per square foot, self-storage is the most profitable asset class in American real estate. No plumbing, no kitchens, no tenant who calls at 2 a.m. because the water heater died. A windowless metal box, a roll-up door, and a padlock the customer buys himself. 3 questions this video answers. What does one of these boxes actually cost to build? Where does the money really come from once it's standing? And why, when the economy collapses and the rest of real estate burns, does this particular business quietly get stronger? Start with the box. Building an apartment complex runs roughly $150 to $200 per square foot before you furnish a single unit. Wiring, plumbing, HVAC, code inspections, kitchens, bathrooms. A single-story drive-up storage facility runs about $45 to $65 per square foot. That's it. A steel frame, insulated panels, a concrete slab, and partitions. In May 2026, the cost of the imported steel went up on tariffs and nudged that figure higher. It's still a fraction of what a place to live costs to build. Run the arithmetic on a 60,000 square foot building, as apartments call it $175 a foot, $10.5 million in hard construction. As storage, call it $55 a foot, $3.3 million. Same footprint, roughly a third of the cost, and nothing inside it can leak. That's the top of the market and the floor at the same time, because there isn't much middle. You can buy an existing facility instead of building one. In 2024, transaction volume across the sector cleared $10 billion, with cap rates running 5 to 7.5% depending on the asset. Or you go small, a 5-acre lot, a couple hundred units, a manager who also cuts the grass. Zoning usually files storage under industrial use, which means cheap land nobody else wants. The paperwork is a business license and a lien-compliant lease. There is no residential tenant law to learn because nobody is allowed to live there. So the question becomes obvious. Why would anyone in their right mind build a windowless shed instead of something people admire? The answer is simple. The shed keeps almost everything it earns. Officially, a storage facility makes money by renting empty space. Unofficially, it makes money in 3 or 4 ways, but more on that later. Here's the first mechanism, and it's the whole business. Call it the inertia tax. You don't advertise the real rent. You advertise the move-in rent. Across the industry, the average first-month discount is around 45%, and plenty of operators run first month free. A 10 by 10 unit, the workhorse size, about a third of all rentals carries an average street rate near $120 a month. You get the customer in the door on a number that isn't real. Then the boxes cross the threshold. Furniture, the dead parents' dishes, the boxes from the divorce. And here's the part people don't talk about. The day those boxes are inside, the customer's willingness to ever move them again starts falling. Yours doesn't. You raise the rent. Here's how it looks in actual dollars. That $120 unit becomes $138 the next year. $18 a month, $216 over the year. Now price the alternative. To leave, the customer rents a truck, call it $40 a day plus mileage, and gas gives up a Saturday, recruits 2 people who now expect pizza, and hauls a sofa down a hallway. Realistically, several $100s in a ruined weekend. So the customer does the math everyone does. $18 and stays. Then you do it again the following year. Sophisticated operators raise existing customers well above what a new customer down the road would pay for the identical box, and they'll do it more than once in the same year. The industry has a flat term for it. Existing customer rate increases. The average customer now stays 18.5 months, and that number keeps climbing because the housing market froze and nobody's moving anything. You are not renting them a room. You are renting them a junk drawer by the month with a meter on it. Now contrast 2 owners buying the exact same Inertia. The mom-and-pop operator sets a fair rent and never touches it because raising it on a nice repeat customer feels rude. He leaves the tax on the table. The institutional operator runs dynamic pricing software that treats the customer's laziness as a line item and harvests it 4 times a year. Same box, same customer. The only difference is who's willing to press. Second mechanism, the stuff bolted on beside the rent. Tenant insurance, sold at the counter, taken up by roughly 2/3 of customers, near pure margin, on a policy that pays out on a padlocked box that rarely floods. Locks and boxes and tape at retail markup. Administrative fees. Late fees, which are not a penalty in this model, they're a product. Third mechanism, the business tenant. Contractors, e-commerce sellers, a plumber storing pipe. They're under a third of the units but throw off more than 40% of the revenue because they pay 25 to 35% premiums for 24-hour access and they stay for years. They don't cry about an $18 hike. They expense it. Now the cost side, and this is where the box wins. An apartment degrades while you own it. Roofs, boilers, turnover, a full remodel every time someone leaves. A storage unit that empties out requires a broom. The operating expense ratio across the sector runs 25 to 40%, which leaves a net operating margin of 60 to 70%. Luxury apartments, after the toilets and the tenant law and the vacancy, operate closer to 30. A facility turns cash positive at about 65% occupancy. National occupancy for the big operators sat near 85% at the end of 2025. The typical box is running 20 points above the line where it starts printing money. Then, the stress case. A rate shock, a housing freeze, a recession, the thing that empties an office tower and evicts an apartment. Look at one stretch, 2008 into 2009. As the financial system came apart, national storage occupancy dropped to about 82.8% in the first quarter of 2009. It dropped. It did not collapse. Most storage REITs saw revenue fall around 2.5% year over year. Across the wider economy, plenty of businesses lost 40 to 50%. The recession didn't hollow the boxes out. It filled them with the furniture of people who'd just been downsized, foreclosed, or moved back in with family. The four doors into this business are death, divorce, downsizing, and dislocation, and a recession opens all four at once. You can't put an apartment on pause either, but a recession is the apartment's disaster and the storage unit's marketing department. Now the part that runs underneath the rent. What happens when the customer stops paying? If a residential tenant stops paying, you enter the court system. Notice, filing, a hearing, an appeal, months of a non-paying occupant you're legally forbidden from removing. 6 months to a year in a bad jurisdiction with legal bills the whole way. Self-storage doesn't use that door. Every state has its own Self-Service Storage Act, and those statutes hand the operator something the apartment landlord will never have, a self-help remedy. No judge. From the moment the boxes arrive, you hold a lien on them, miss payment, and in most states after 30 continuous days of default, the enforcement clock starts. You cut the lock. You post the notice. You advertise the sale. Somewhere between 30 and 90 days from the first missed payment, you auction the contents of a stranger's life to the highest bidder in the parking lot. And here's the flat truth of that auction, admitted by the operators themselves. It rarely covers the debt. Most of what's in the box is worth almost nothing to anyone but the person who left it. The sale isn't really about the money. It's about the box. The auction clears the unit, and the same empty air is listed at full street rate that afternoon and rented by the next customer walking through one of those four doors. The point was never the junk. The point was the room. Now, how this business dies? Because it can? The threat from inside is supply. This asset is easy to build, and easy to build is easy to overbuild. There are already more than 50,000 storage facilities in the United States, more locations than Subway, Dollar General, and CVS combined, by industry count sitting on over 2.1 billion square feet of rentable space. When money is cheap, developers pour concrete on top of each other in the same metro, and rents in that metro fall off a cliff. The 2010s were a monument to it. Build a beautiful box in an oversupplied market, and your inertia tax means nothing because the customer's cheaper alternative is now visible from the same intersection. The threat from outside is the interest rate. This is a leveraged asset dressed as a boring one. When financing costs jump, new development stalls good for whoever already owns the box, but existing owners with debt coming due have to refinance at the new rate. And a 65% margin business can still drown if the loan resets against it. Land and building costs are up 40 to 50% since 2017. The box doesn't kill you. The mortgage on the box does. So here's the reframe, and it isn't an opinion. Self-storage is not a real estate business. It is a subscription that charges you rent on a decision you keep refusing to make the decision about what you actually need to keep. The official product is space. The real product is deferral, the removal, month after month, of the obligation to choose. And the price of deferral is set with precision, always one move out just below what deciding would cost you. If that were a niche, it would be a niche. It isn't. Roughly 1 in 3 Americans use storage or intend to. Public Storage, ticker PSA, founded in 1972, headquartered in a low building in Glendale, California, is now a real estate investment trust worth north of $50 billion, operating 3,533 facilities as of the 31st of December 2025, pulling in close to $5 billion in annual revenue at operating margins around 46%. In 2023, Extra Space bought Life Storage for $12.7 billion and folded in more than 1,200 properties in a single stroke. The smartest capital in real estate isn't fighting over the glass towers, it's buying the sheds. Time to pull it all together and answer the actual question. How much money do you make if you do this right? Let's run the math on 3 realistic versions of what a billionaire can do with the same $10 million. Option 1. Buy a residential apartment building. You deal with broken toilets at 2 a.m., you navigate strict tenant eviction laws, and you operate on thin 30% margins while your property slowly degrades. Call it $1 million in gross rents. After OPEX, taxes, turnover, and the legal fees, the building nets you somewhere near $300,000, and it cost you a maintenance crew and your weekends. Option 2, buy a commercial retail plaza. You tie up millions in capital, you rely on your tenants not going bankrupt, and you face the constant threat of e-commerce wiping them out. On paper, the margin looks better. In practice, a single anchor tenant folding takes a floor of your income with it, and the storefront can sit dark for a year. A good year nets maybe $450,000. A bad tenant makes it zero. Option 3, build a self-storage empire. You construct a windowless metal box with zero plumbing, you exploit human inertia to raise the rent 15% every year, and you legally confiscate the contents if a customer misses a payment, securing a 70% profit margin on a perfectly empty room. That 60,000-foot box you built for around a third of the apartment's cost throws off $700,000 in gross rent, holds a 6.5 to 7.0% operating margin through booms and busts alike, and nets you north of $450,000 from a building that has never once, in its entire existence, needed a plumber. Not bad for a business whose only real product is your refusal to throw anything away.